we need to be able to make sure we are, in the smallest ways possible, building this level of awareness. It doesn't have to be on the big things, like on the smallest things possible. When somebody cuts you off in traffic and you feel this bubbling up inside of you, just taking a pause and saying, why am I so upset? Why does this anger me? What is it about what that person did that actually is creating some kind of fear inside of me, especially for men? For men, anger is a more acceptable version of fear. And so it's much easier. And it happens to women too, but men especially, it's like getting angry. Oh, I can't believe that MFer cut me off in traffic. What he's really saying is, I fear that I must not be valuable enough of a person, because if I was, they would have never done that to me. Or I would never do that to somebody else. So now I'm imposing what I think would be the best course of action in that person's life onto them. But I can't possibly know what's best for anybody else. So it's really just kind of having that pause where in the moment where anything's happening, just slowing down.
Welcome my guest, Jason J.E. Goldberg. He is a mindset mentor and self-leadership coach for celebrities, changemakers, and CEOs. He is also the host of the Jason Goldberg is Ruining Podcasting podcast, author of the #1 international bestseller on self-leadership entitled Prison Break, and the creator of Playful, prosperity, and competition-proof business immersion programs. JG has been featured expert on media outlets such as ABC, CBC, and Fox, as well as teaching the MindValley and SoulPancake platforms, and has founded multiple startups, including one in partnership with NASA and the Space Shuttle program. He now focuses on blending his signature mix of simple and transformative wisdom, captivating storytelling, practical business mentorship, and belly-busting humor to make personal growth less personal growthy, and to leave everyone he meets with at least 5% more joy than when he found them. All right. I am so honored to welcome on the show, Jason Goldberg. This is such an honor. From what I've learned of you so far, you really bring light to such heavy situations, if you want to say, or heavy topics, which I really admire in you. You bring the humor and just the sensibility about it, like more tangible, honest conversations that really could transform people's lives. So I just want to really recognize that and honor that in you, because I think that more fun we could have in this space, if you want to say this personal development space, the more enticing it is. Like, I'm on this journey, you're on this journey, let's join this journey together and just have a good old time, right? So welcome 100%. To the show.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate you, and I'm so happy to be here, and I really appreciate that reflection. And yeah, that's really what I feel like I was put here to do on the earth. Is there's plenty of people that have some amazing wisdom and amazing things they're sharing in the world that's transformational, and there's a lot of people for whom that isn't as accessible because it feels really serious or it feels really heavy. So for the people that are in that kind of space where they're like, I'd love to get more into personal growth, but it just feels very serious, I'm hoping I'll give them some place to land so they actually get access to all the stuff that's transformational for you and me.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing about like trauma or, these heavy topics that you want to say is in the personal development space. A lot of people don't want to open the box because it's scary. Right. And it's like, they don't want to shine a light on the shadows because it's painful. It's like revisiting trauma is never fun. But on the flip side is so much growth and perspective and awareness that then we could take charge of our life. And so going into that topic, I really want to hear, for people to understand where you came from and what makes you understand the human experience to the depth that you do and everything you share. I know it's been quite a journey. So if you could kind of share tidbits of that.
Yeah. The way I'm able to do those things you just said is trauma. Back to the capital T, trauma. Thank goodness trauma is always a part of the conversation, especially when you live in Southern California. I feel like for me, where a lot of this came from is from my upbringing, from, being raised by a single mother, and I'm an only child. So it was just always me and mom. I always say my dad was a professional magician. He disappeared as soon as he found out my mom was pregnant. And so that was kind of the thing. Like, he just wasn't wasn't there. It was always just me and mom. And so for me, I kind of came into a world with, having two parents, one who stayed, thank God, love my mom, she's amazing. And my mom suffered a lot with stress and anxiety and depression and a lot of these things. So I kind of came into an environment that from a very young age, I learned that I needed to help manage my mom's experience, even at, the age of 6 or 7 or 8, being there for her panic attacks or anxiety attacks or whatever else. And again, this is no judgment on her. She was doing her best as a single mother raising a boy, of all things, who's, I'm sure I was tormenting her. So I had the one parent that kind of had those things that I felt like I had to take responsibility for. And the other parent who, because I didn't know developmentally yet, didn't want me. Right. And so now I'm unlovable, and I'm not wanted. And so it became an effort. Developing things like empathy and humor initially were my ways to try to mitigate and decrease the likelihood that anybody else would abandon me, that anybody else would leave me. Right? Because if I could find a way to connect with you, you're not going to go away, right? You feel connection. We want to feel connection. Of course, I had none of this language when I was younger, but I can look back and see now that in elementary school, in middle school, in high school, this is what I was doing. I was, super overweight my entire life. I was kind of the chunky kid by first grade. I was 250 pounds by the time I was 15, which when you're 15, that's when kids are very loving and accepting and would never make fun of you because of your physical appearance, never. And then by the time I was in my late 20s, I had gotten up over 330 pounds. And all of that was really going back to these feelings of unlovability, of not enoughness, all these things, me taking those thoughts seriously, which we can definitely dive into kind of what I mean by that, me taking those thoughts seriously. And because I took them seriously, I needed to find a mechanism to cope with that level of suffering. And so for me, it was food. Right? Food was my comfort. And so if I was happy, I would eat. If I was sad, I would eat. If I was celebrating, I would eat. If I was depressed, I would eat. If I had a busy day coming up at work, I would eat. Like whatever I needed to do to regulate my emotional system via food, I would do that. And so this entire experience of life for me for essentially the first 30 years was this up and down roller coaster of super high highs, super low lows, lots of depression, lots of anxiety, suicidal ideation into my late 20s. And then, of course, this physical weight that I was carrying around that was just debilitating. I mean, I remember when with my ex-wife, she would see me sometimes in the morning, literally. She would catch me on the ground, in the closet, in the fetal position, crying because I felt so disgusted with what I looked like and who I was. And so that whole thing was a really challenging thing to go through. And it wasn't honestly until 2009 that I actually discovered personal growth for the first time. And I'm happy to tell kind of story about how that went. But that's kind of what my trajectory has been, just coming from this place of needing to feel connection, needing to feel enough, needing to feel love and approval and validation, and finding that empathy and humor were ways that I could receive that.
Yeah. Well, so talking about the weight gain, because I think, when somebody is young, they're very impressionable and like we usually take on the habits of our parents. And so it's kind of like we're, if you want to say it's somewhat a victim to those circumstances. Yep. When we're adult, we have the responsibility to take ownership of our life and make better decisions. Like that's what changes when we're adult. Like now it's your responsibility. What happened in the past is maybe not your fault, but now we get to take ownership of that. But I want to touch on the weight gain because I think this is really important, possibly for any of those listening right now to understand our identity is then formed around that weight. Like I am a heavy person. I am overweight. I'm fat. I'm this, that, and the other. And it's very hard to switch out of that, especially when you, as you carried that along at such a young age throughout your whole adolescence and into your adulthood. So how does somebody, reframe their identity around that and change their beliefs? Because I think that, you might have been carrying around this physical weight, but what comes with that is beliefs around it too. Like I can't lose weight. Like if I work out, I'll be laughed at or whatever. So how does somebody begin to kind of shift into that empowering state opposed to kind of that victim circumstance? Like this is how I am.
Yeah, it's a really big deal. You said the word in my mind that describes it perfectly. It's identity. And whatever identity we assume, we will respond to that projection, right? And so for me, I would walk around in the world thinking that way. And even when I lost the weight, there were still times where I would look in the mirror and see the 300-pound version of me, right? Because it's so deeply ingrained that even when the physical body changes, it doesn't mean everything else changes automatically. I would love to say that when I lost the weight, all of my depression went away and my anxiety went away and my stress went away. I'd be lying through my teeth. Like, it helped. It definitely, there was a helpfulness there. And there was helpfulness not just in the aesthetic, but of course the body actually releasing that weight made me feel better in general, just from a chemical standpoint. But what I realized was that beyond the physical weight that I was carrying around, there was the mental weight and there was the emotional weight. And so I was overweight in so many areas of my life, WEIGHT, which was also causing me to be overweight, WAIT, in doing the things I wanted to do, like creating the things I wanted to create, leaving my corporate job and starting my first business, like all these things I really wanted to do. But there was a self-propagating loop of the more weight I'm holding, the longer I wait to do the thing. The longer I wait to do the thing, the more weight I feel, right? And it's just this whole cycle. And so the first part of really understanding personal responsibility is huge. But the challenge with personal responsibility or having the conversation about personal responsibility is that it doesn't often come with a feeling of freedom or liberation. It comes with the freedom of shame and self-judgment, right? So initially when somebody says, like, for me, and forget somebody, for me, when I had this moment, and it's the first chapter of my book, Prison Break, the chapter is called The Day the Universe Cut Me Off. When I had this moment of realizing, like, oh my goodness, the experience of life I'm having right now is completely something that I'm creating. There wasn't this angel choir singing like, oh my God, you found the key. You can now be free forever. It was like, what? Shit, I've been doing this what an idiot. What's wrong with me that I would do all this? Like, why haven't I taken personal responsibility? And like, it just became this thing that was another layer of shame for me. So the first part is just an acceptance that, listen, we're doing the best we can, right? Always. And if my mom had known better, she would have done better, right? Or if she would have known differently, she would have done differently. She's just doing what she learned, right? So it's this thing where somebody has to break the cycle, and the personal responsibility there of breaking the cycle, like you mentioned, that's really the main thing. So for me to say, okay, this has been historically what I've done, right? It's very important to use words like historically, right? Because now we're looking at data points. We're not looking at emotional things. We're not looking at a diagnosis of who I am. We're simply looking at a description of what we're seeing. And I can have distance from a description, right? So that's the first part, is if I can take it out of diagnosis and into description, then I don't have to feel so much shame. The other part of this, though, is to really go deeper. And this wasn't initially how I did it. Initially, it was very much just like, taking stock of where I wasn't taking full ownership of what I needed to be doing in my life without shame, as much as possible, noticing when that brought up feelings of shame and sitting with that and being with that. But the personal responsibility part was big. The bigger part, though, and this really wasn't even an insight that landed for me until after my book came out. My book came out in 2016. Is that there's another layer of this, because there are three ways that in my experience, we can experience the world. Level one is the prisoner perspective, right? The victim mentality. Something good happens, I'm happy. Something bad happens, I'm sad. If that's the case, if that's reality for me, then my only recourse is to mold, modify, and manipulate all the people and situations and everything around me so that I can be happy. I already had a full-time job. I didn't need another full-time job. That's just not something I want to take on, but that's the way I lived my life for the first 30 years. We upgrade to level two, and level two is where we start looking at the content of our thinking, right? This is where reframing comes in. This is where telling ourselves a better, more empowering story comes in. All very, very helpful things, all very important things to do, and things that I still do to this day. And there's a layer that's deeper or higher than that, if you want to look at it from a consciousness and kind of spirit perspective. And that's to understand that at level two, we're living at the content of thinking. At level three, we're working in the context of thought. Okay. So it's not what I'm thinking that has me stressed or anxious. It's just that I'm thinking and that I'm taking that thinking seriously. That's the only thing that actually makes me stressed out or depressed. And I know this to be true because if it was actually the circumstance that was making me upset of whatever was going on in the world, then whenever I went to sleep, I would still be stressed out. Now, it doesn't mean sometimes we don't have a bad night's sleep because things have happened and we're stressed out. That happens. I get that. But for the most part, I've talked to clients tons that during the day, they're really stressed about this thing at work. And I ask them, how did you sleep last night? They said, yeah, okay, I guess pretty good. I was like, cool. So where did all the stressful stuff go while you were sleeping? Because if it's real and it's the circumstances that are causing this, then you should be having it 24 hours a day. It should never go away from you. And so that opens up this conversation, this inquiry inside of myself of, well, then what is the source of my suffering? What is the source of my joy? Like, where does this stuff actually come from? If it's not circumstantial and it isn't something where I need to reframe it to feel it, what else could it be? And so the way that I have done this for myself and for my clients, I have one of my clients I've worked with for a couple of years now. She was one of the female leads in one of the Batman movies back in the day. And so we were talking one day about identity, and this kind of idea occurred to me to share with her. And so I said to her, I'm asking you, Erica, when you think of Batman, the movies, what actor comes to mind for you? Because there's been so many.
What's his face? I'm forgetting his name. Sorry. The original one.
Michael Keaton. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah,
You're
yes,
a purist.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you. You win. When people say Ben Affleck, I cut off the podcast and I never talk to that person again. So yes, Michael Keaton. So imagine you, Erica, are directing a Batman movie with Michael Keaton, and you're on set. You film a scene. He does all his Batman-y things. You yell cut. You're talking to the crew and everybody else getting ready for the next scene. And you happen to look over and you notice him walking back and forth in the set, looking really stressed out. So you're the director. He's your star. You want to make sure he's okay. So you walk up to him. You go, "Hey, man, what's going on?" And he goes, "Erica, I don't know. Like, what if I'm not strong enough to beat the Joker? What if my technology isn't powerful enough? What if the people of Gotham die on my watch? How am I supposed to deal with walking through the rest of my life with the blood of all these people on my hands because I wasn't able to save them?" And you, Erica, the director, are thinking in your head, the fuck is he talking about? It's a fucking movie. What is he doing? But you want to be supportive, right? So you have two choices in that moment. Choice number one, you can say, "Okay, Batman, let's make sure your tech is strong enough. Let's work together to, beat the Joker and save the people of Gotham." That's one option. And the other option is to remind him that he's Michael Keaton playing the role of Batman. And once he realizes that before he was on set filming, he was in a hair and makeup trailer. And before he was in a hair and makeup trailer, he was driving to the set. And before he was driving to the set, he was home with his family. Like, when he really recognizes, oh, that's a role that I was cast in that I play really well. Like, when I'm on set and I'm playing Batman, I am playing Batman. When I'm playing the role of Jason, the overwhelmed entrepreneur who's frustrated that my new project's not getting off the ground fast enough, I nail that shit. I am Oscar award winning level of nailing that role, right? The challenge becomes when I carry that role with me into the rest of my life. Imagine I was cast as a bank robber in a movie and I forgot that I was cast in that role and I brought home the bank robber role into my family life. And I'm waving a gun in their face and I'm screaming at them and telling them to get on the floor. Like, the implications of that are pretty strong. They're pretty bad. So when I really get in this place, when I can remember that, when I can sit for just a moment, and this is, again, something I do for myself at least once a day. I've already done it once this morning. And that I'll do maybe again later today if it comes up, is I will name that. I will literally say, as an example, today I have been cast in the role of Jason, the frustrated entrepreneur who wants his project to be moving faster. Right? That's the role that I'm in. And I'm in that role and I get it and I feel it and I'm tense and I'm upset and I'm irritated. I feel it. And I sit there, I go, okay, given that that's the role that I'm playing right now, I'll close my eyes just for a minute. Given that that's the role, I'm not getting rid of it. I'm not reframing it. I'm not ignoring it, pretending it's not there, any of those things, explaining it away, none of that. In this moment, right here, right now, where my feet are, without an attachment to that role, right? The role's still there. I can step back into it whenever I want to, but without an attachment to that role, without the self-imposed pressure and seriousness of thinking that I am that role, do I feel more peaceful? Do I feel more stressful? Do I feel more expansive? Do I feel more contracted? What's my experience of life just right here, right now in this moment? And 100% of the time when I do that, the answer is I feel more peaceful. And so the question becomes, who do you think is more apt to deal with Batman's problems, the one who thinks he's actually Batman, or the one who has this peaceful distance, this non-identification that can say, okay, Batman, I see that there's actually some stuff going on in your world that seems important to you. It's life-threatening to you. I understand that it's only ego-threatening, but you think it's life-threatening? Cool. I have perspective, so I'll come help you with your issues. So that's kind of the entire process. I know that was a very long, drawn out thing. I hope it was helpful, but that's the way that I shift identity around any of these things that come up.
I think that's huge. And it's a great example because I think we have to be able to witness our thoughts and be able to pull away from them and not judge them or attach to them. And I think anybody can relate to that spiral of thoughts of negativity that keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper. It's like one thought leads to another negative thought and keeps getting deeper into this tunnel and this abyss. And so I think everybody could recognize that feeling. So when we learn to detach from the feeling and the thought, then we could not judge it. It's part of us. We're experiencing it and have more compassion and grace for what we're experiencing, but also separate it. That's not us. That doesn't have to be us or our identity. And I think that's huge. And I think that's, I think the foundation of any change comes awareness. I don't know if I think you speak about this as well. We need to have awareness so that we can then create this transformation and change. So now it's coming into how do we develop this awareness and be able to detach and not, ride the wave of these negative emotions that we're feeling. What would you say to that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of it is doing things like listening to podcasts like this, right? It's something where, these identities we have, like you mentioned earlier, they didn't spring up overnight. They came as a result of years of either self-talk from ourselves or things that we took in from outside influences that have shaped the way we believe who we are and all those different things. So it's not going to happen overnight, right? This is something why, Zig Ziglar used to say, motivation's like bathing. It doesn't last. And so we say you should do it every day, right? So it's something where we need to first be really conscious about the consumption of what we're taking in. I just realized I've always said I don't watch the news anymore. I stopped watching the news years ago. And it's something I just say in passing. But I went to the dentist's office the other day and they were playing the news in the waiting room. And within 30 seconds, I felt anxiety in my body. And I'm like, wow, I remember I used to wake up every day and the first thing I would do was turn on the TV and be playing the Today Show and listening to all the news while I was getting ready. And so it sounds like such an easy thing, but we need to be subtracting the pieces of consumption that diminish our experience of life. And we need to be amplifying and magnifying the things that actually increase our experience of being connected to life, right? So whatever that looks like for you, find that spiritual practice, whether it's meditation. I meditate every morning for 30 minutes, unless I'm really, really busy, and then I do 40. Reading whatever it is you need to read, movement in your body, all these things that are really basic that everybody, I think a lot of people, myself included at times, have thought, oh, that's too simple, right? It can't be that simple, but it is. So we need to be able to make sure we are, in the smallest ways possible, building this level of awareness. It doesn't have to be on the big things, on the smallest things possible. When somebody cuts you off in traffic and you feel this bubbling up inside of you, just taking a pause and saying, why am I so upset? Why does this anger me? What is it about what that person did that actually is creating some kind of fear inside of me, especially for men? For men, anger is a more acceptable version of fear. And so it's much easier. And it happens to women too, but men especially, it's like getting angry. Oh, I can't believe that MFer cut me off in traffic. What he's really saying is, I fear that I must not be valuable enough of a person because if I was, they would have never done that to me. Or I would never do that to somebody else. So now I'm imposing what I think would be the best course of action in that person's life onto them. But I can't possibly know what's best for anybody else. So it's really just kind of having that pause where in the moment where anything's happening, just slowing down. And there was a woman last night at this talk that I gave, and she said, it's just so hard. Even when you have the awareness, it's so hard to get out of it, right? Even if you have that awareness, how do you then break out of it? And there's a small piece that she's missing there, that it's transformation. It's transformative for you to have the awareness to realize that you're creating that experience and to still be a prisoner, to still be a victim. That's still progress. For you to say, you know what? Yep, I am totally creating this and fuck that guy. I'm going to be a victim for another hour. He should have not done that. I can't believe he did that. What a schmuck. That's actually progress. So just that initial noticing, that initial awareness without feeling any need to change it can sometimes make it easier for the awareness to be developed because you don't think there's something else you have to do on the back end.
That's very interesting to mention that because I never really thought about that because I would think with awareness, then you're obligated to make a better choice. You would think, right? But I think, like you said, it's one step forward to be aware of your actions And then obviously the next progression of that is consciously choosing a better reaction. And so I think that's so huge, is developing this consciousness. I always like to say making a conscious yes or a conscious no to whichever path you're going to lead, is being so aware that you're able to make a better decision. I think, that's probably the gap between this prisoner mindset and a self-leader mindset, is choosing a better direction. So it's like, which way are you going to go? And I don't think there's anybody listening right now that wants to be imprisoned to their thoughts, emotions, or beliefs. And so obviously this whole conversation is about how can we move into being a self-leader and really taking ownership for our life. So I know you didn't touch on it, but I do think this story is really great, because I believe personal responsibility is, I know from my experience, when let's say this was like 4.5 years ago, maybe 5, I remember when I fully sat in my shit and I realized I'm responsible for all this. Like, I play a part in my life. So that means that how empowering it could be if I take responsibility, because then I have the ability to now change the trajectory of where I want to go. Because once we start putting blame, like, oh, I'm, like, for example, if I were to talk about relationships, where my big struggle was, a lot of friends, because they're my friends, they want to be supporting me. And so they'll say, oh, he's just toxic. He just doesn't want a serious relationship, and he's not worthy of you, blah, blah, blah. But really, if I were to look at it, it's like, okay, well, he might be whatever he is, doesn't matter. But what the truth is, I'm allowing it to happen. I'm staying in this situation. So I'm responsible for this, because I have every ability to walk away and choose a better option, right? Yeah. And so I remember taking that responsibility was very empowering. And instead of like really feeling this deep shame, you'll experience shame and hurt and kind of like this victim mindset, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did this to myself. But then when you switch into like, oh, but it's my responsibility, now I can make a better choice. Like, that's empowering. So anyways, back to what you were sharing. Yeah. So I think one of the parts of your story, and I was actually sharing this with my partner the other day because I thought it was a really empowering story, is that moment where you took ownership for where you were with especially the weight you were carrying. If you could kind of touch on that story, because I think it's really powerful in really crystallizing personal responsibility.
Yeah, 100%. I want to I'll tell that story. Do you mind if I share one other thing about what we were just saying, though, that I think was just, because you really brought something up there that I really want to touch on. So I love what you said. And so that there's going back to this whole piece of like, once you have the awareness, you feel like there's an obligation, or we sometimes feel there's an obligation to then do something about it. And part of what allows us to, and it'll sound counterintuitive to a lot of people when you first hear it, part of what allows us to make the better choice is to stop putting pressure on ourselves to make the better choice. Right? As soon as that doesn't become a thing where it's like, here's a new diagnosis. The first diagnosis was I wasn't aware enough. Now I'm aware. The new diagnosis is if you're aware and you don't do anything, then you're spiritually bypassing. And I got a new diagnosis, right? So it's like, I don't want to keep shifting from diagnosis to diagnosis. At some point, I want to break out of the cycle. And so part of this is the recognition that sometimes we're not at the level of thinking we need to make the right decision. Right. And so if you look at something like intuition, right? Intuition is a big thing, especially in our communities. It's a big thing. And I love the idea of intuition. I have my own kind of beliefs about where it comes from, but I love intuition. And I actually there's a chapter about this in my book as well. And it's my favorite chapter, as in it's the one I need to go back to for reminders the most. It's the one that I reread for myself the most. But think about this. So intuition and kind of knowing what to do, being guided, having this kind of internal wisdom that comes up and tells you kind of what to do next. That's a great thing. And so when we're talking about having awareness and then making a better choice, having your intuition be involved in that experience is fantastic. Like, and whether you call it your intuition, your gut, like whatever it is, right? But here's the challenge. Imagine that you had a coach or a mentor or an aunt or an uncle or whoever, or a friend, somebody that anytime you needed anything, you could go to them. They would drop everything. They're there for you. They give you the best advice ever. Like they're your go-to. You love these people. One day you're struggling with something. You're not feeling good. You need some assistance. You go over to their house. You walk in the door and you see them completely drunk on the floor. Like they're like David Hasselhoff eating the hamburger, like just completely out of sorts entirely. Do you think you would ask for their advice in that moment?
No,
No,
absolutely.
of course not, right? Because they're not in the state to be able to help you. In fact, in that moment, you'd probably say, they have been so helpful to me over the years. I need to turn it around now. I need to have some love and some care for them. I need to support them while they're in this state until they get back to where they need to be. And the same thing happens with our intuition. When we're in a low space, when we're in a low level of consciousness, whether we're beating ourselves up or we've had some awareness that something is not right and it needs to change, if that puts us in a low state of our intuition or a low state of our consciousness, then we can't listen to what's coming up. It's not your intuition speaking anymore. It's not your gut speaking anymore. It's fear, it's self-loathing. And my personal belief is that intuition will never be unkind. It may be confronting, but it'll never be unkind. And so in the same way, if you had this confidant who was drunk and you knew you couldn't trust their advice at that point, there's nothing you can do to sober them up more quickly. That just happens naturally. It's part of the system that the alcohol will work its way through the bloodstream and you'll become sober again. We need to sit with ourselves in that way too, until we kind of become sober again. And once we allow ourselves to become sober again, once we allow our mind to settle, in much the same way if you shake up a snow globe and it's like completely chaotic, it's not your job to grab every piece of snow and put it on the ground in order for things to be peaceful. You just put the snow globe down and within a minute, the snow just settles on its own. Our mind works the same way. And so if we can get used to the awareness doesn't mean I need to make a decision right this moment. And I trust, because it's always happened, I trust that my mind will eventually settle and I'll see things more clearly than I see them when I'm in the shit. I can release all this pressure of needing to make some big decision to change my life right now and know that when my mind comes back up and it settles, then I can look at what I could do next. And my opportunities, my possibilities are so much broader when I do that.
Yeah, that's so important and I think that's why meditation is definitely what a lot of leaders lean to, is because it creates that space to kind of calm and settle and get to an even keel space where you can make more conscious, better decisions, or at least be able to not judge what you're feeling at that moment. I think that's so key. Yeah. And
That's
so,
exactly.
I know we were touching on the experience you had where you were, recognizing that you needed to take ownership of your life and what happened to really recognize that. And the reason why I think this is important, because I think when it comes down to the key to change is number one, awareness, and then taking personal responsibility. I believe that's kind of at the foundation. That's my personal belief, just from my personal experience, because I was running the same cycle over and over, victim, and also just like overwhelmed with my own emotions. And I know anybody listening could recognize a moment in their life where they felt stuck in this, oh, woe is me, and really wanting to get out of it, but don't know how. So.
So my experience with that was, it was 2009. So I was in my late 20s. At that point, I was still in my corporate job. I was in IT consulting for the better part of 15 years before I became an entrepreneur 11 years ago. And so I was in that job in my 20s, making well over six figures, director of engineering and operations for this tech consulting firm, had the house, had the car, had all the things, right? And I have historically been a funky sock collector. I don't know why I got into it, but I just think socks are really cool. And for men, a lot of times we don't have as many ways to show our personality. Socks work for me. And so I was sitting at my desk. I remember I was sitting in Orlando. I used to live in Orlando, Florida, sitting at my desk. And I went to go make a purchase of some funky socks on Amazon. It was like $60, $70 purchase of socks. And it was my bank card. So it was like directly tied to my bank account. And the card kept getting declined. And I knew that I definitely had 60 or 70 bucks in my account. There was no way I didn't. So I knew that wasn't the issue, but it kept getting declined. And I had such anger issues back then. I was the kid that punched holes in walls when I was a teenager. And if somebody cut me off in traffic, I would literally chase them in traffic. And I was such a wuss that if I would have caught them, I wouldn't have done anything. But like, I just was overtaken by my anger and didn't know how to deal with it. And so in that moment, when my card kept getting declined, I got super angry and I storm out of my office and I go into the lobby of the office building that I'm working in, and I have my phone and I call the bank and I'm mashing the zero to try to get a live person because I'm sick of this stupid automated thing trying to figure everything out. And I finally get this lovely human named Steven who's like so sweet and kind and ready to help. And I'm just a tyrant, just like yelling at him, saying like, what's going on? Why is my card not working? And he takes a look at the account and he says, well, Mr. Goldberg, it looks like there was some potentially fraudulent activity on the account. And so we shut off the card to protect your assets. To which most normal people would say, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Like, I'm so happy you're looking out for me. What do we do now? Not me. I was just an angry human. And so I was so upset. Like, what do you mean? Did somebody hack my account? Did somebody steal my identity? I demand to know what the charges are. Tell me what the charges are right now. Stephen, so sweet, so kind, stayed very level-headed since I couldn't. And he did a little typing on the computer, and he came back and he said, it looks like there were 4 fast food transactions in Orlando, in your town, in one day. And our system flagged that as potentially fraudulent activity because sometimes people will steal cards and make small purchases to test before they go make a large purchase. And of course, it wasn't fraudulent. That was me. I had eaten at 4 fast food restaurants in one day, right? Because that was my coping mechanism. That's how I tried to diminish my own suffering. And this is not one of those things where I say, and that was the wake-up call where I knew something needed to change. No, it wasn't. I was morbidly obese for the last 15 years. Like, it wasn't like this was a new thing that I hadn't noticed before. But for whatever reason, maybe it's divine timing, maybe it literally was, as I said, the universe cutting me off, I wasn't able to find anybody else to blame in that moment. It was the first time ever for whatever, and I don't have a methodology to help you get there. For whatever reason in that moment, I couldn't blame my genetics. I couldn't blame the hot weather in Florida that stopped me from going outside and being active. I couldn't blame my employees that were dumb sometimes. I couldn't do it with my clients that were just demanding, or my boss who didn't understand me. I couldn't find anybody to blame. And that's why I say initially it didn't feel like liberation. It felt like shame, because I finally came back to me where I said, $1 billion bank, multi-billion-dollar bank just told you no longer have access to your own money because of the decisions you're making. It was just a bright neon sign. I could not avoid it. And that became the thing where I really started to look at myself and say, you know what? I'm a pretty practical guy. I was in technology. We have to reverse engineer things all the time to figure out really complex things. I know there are people out there, like, not just I know theoretically, I personally know people out there that have been through objectively worse things than I have. Not that we're comparing traumas. You can drown in 8 feet of water or 8 inches of water, but still, objectively to me, they've been through way worse than me, and they didn't seem to carry around the same level of suffering that I did. So what was it that they knew that I didn't? And so that's what got me into personal growth. It was really an attempt to analytically deconstruct and reverse engineer joy, as if that's possible. And that's what I started learning, was personal responsibility was a big part of that.
I love that story, because I think that is really key when you're starting to recognize, like, oh, I have nobody else to blame but myself, or at least being able to recognize like you're a part of the equation for where you're at. So let's talk, because your book, Prison Break, which I read, there's so much goodness in here. And obviously you share a lot of your story and how you moved into losing weight and all these things. But most importantly, I want to touch on is moving from this victim mindset to more, like I said, this, the personal leadership, or sorry, what's the word? Self-leadership mindset. Because I think that, anybody listening to this right now, they are definitely striving to be the best they could be in the world. And I think when we start taking that responsibility and being able to look at our past or our current situation as not like, oh, woe is me, like poor me, and stay in that space too long, it's being able to witness it and being able to give grace and notice the feelings you're having and why they're coming up, and maybe questioning why they're coming up, like noticing that fear, but then moving into this self-leadership. And I think it's a lifelong journey. I think you and we're still on this journey. It's like, personal growth is going to be always a part of our life if we choose it to be, right? Which is the ultimate goal. So how do we really start to move into being more in self-leadership mindset and just really guiding ourselves along in the best way we can?
Yeah, you nailed it. Like, people will read the book or hear me do a keynote or something, and they'll come up to me afterwards and say, I get it. I get the prisoner thing crystal clear. I get the self-leader thing crystal clear. How do you do the self-leader thing 100% of the time? And my response is, let me know when you find out, because I have no clue. Like, the human experience is that I'm going to have prisoner moments, because I'm going to get lost in the illusion. I'm going to be in a movie theater and be so sucked into the movie that I forget that I'm in a movie until somebody walks by and accidentally knocks my chair, and then I get jolted forward and I go, oh, oh yeah, that's right, I'm watching a movie. Like, it's just, sometimes you get caught up in the illusion. So I have no desire to get to an immunity from life. I think a lot of times in personal growth, that's what people are looking for. How do we get to a place where all we experience is joy all the time? And there are people who are heavily medicated or sociopathic that maybe have access to that. I am neither one of those, as far as I know. I am neither one of those. And so I don't think that that's something to attain or to strive for. I strive for, how do I navigate the stuff when it comes up? It's inevitable that it's going to come up. So the great thing about distinctions, right? And I work a lot in metaphors, distinctions, and stories. And the great thing about distinctions is a distinction is this versus that, right? So if you have the distinction of vegan versus non-vegan, and you know that vegans do not eat dairy, they don't eat animal products, and you know that non-vegans do eat those things. If you are a vegan and you're walking in the grocery store, you don't have to do any internal work or put blinders around your eyes when the cheese aisle comes up to make sure you don't go down that. If you're a vegan, then you choose in that moment to say, that doesn't even occur to me to go down that aisle. Why would I go down that aisle? What I identify as a vegan, and this is what I believe as a vegan. So the great thing about having the distinction of prisoner versus self-leader is, you know, intuitively, like, I really didn't have to write the book. I literally probably could have written a 2-page pamphlet that said, if you're a prisoner, you know what it feels like. You're mad at other people. You're blaming people. You typically feel, you know, like outside circumstance dictates how you feel, and that you have to change things. And if happy things happen, then you're happy. Sad things happen, you're sad. And when you're a self-leader, you take more personal responsibility. You know that creativity is greater than circumstance. If you bring enough creativity and love and devotion to a problem, you can overcome it. It doesn't have to take over you. So yeah, if you look at the distinction between self-leader and prisoner, or like a victim mentality, people know intuitively what that means, what that looks like, because they know what it feels like. You know when you feel empowered, and you know when you feel disempowered. You know when you feel like, you know, like you said, woe is me, or who can I blame, or I'm irritated and agitated. That person shouldn't have done that to me. How dare they? Like, all of those things. Nobody feels empowered when they say those things, right? And so on the self-leader side, you know that, you know, you play a major role. You have personal responsibility. There's always something creatively you can do. One of my mantras is, creativity is greater than circumstance, right? So if you pour your creativity into something, you'll figure out a solution, right? Everything is figure outable, like Marie Forleo says. Everything is figure outable. And so when we have that distinction, then it's almost like speaking two languages. So if you were raised in a house that only spoke French, you're not stupid or unevolved or anything else because you don't speak Spanish. It just wasn't available to you. But then at some point you start practicing Spanish just because it'd be fun for you, not because French is the worst thing in the world. You can keep speaking French the rest of your life if you want. It's no problem. But you say, you know what, there's something about Spanish that maybe feels a little fun for me, right? That's different. It's novel. I want to try it. And so you start trying it and it feels super foreign. And you're like, this Spanish thing sucks. I'm going back to French. French was so much easier. I have so much experience with French. But if you stick with Spanish a little longer, you start noticing you become a little more fluent, a little more fluent, a little more fluent. And then you realize somebody talks to you one day, and in your head, you see that you can respond in French or Spanish in that moment. You notice, you go, holy crap, I have two completely different languages that I can respond with right now. Which one do I choose to respond with? And so if we're saying French is the prisoner, this is nothing about French people, by the way, and Spanish is the self-leader, then having those two perspectives available to you means you can choose which one you operate from. So somebody cuts you off in traffic, somebody shuts down your idea at work, your partner says something that triggers you. You notice, once you've been practicing self-leadership, you notice, okay, you can ask yourself the question, if I were to respond to this as a prisoner, what would I do? Right? And you know, that's super easy. I would yell at him and I would tell him he's wrong and how dare he say that? Like, that's what I would do. Cool. Great. French. Got it. If I was going to respond as a self-leader, what would I do? Well, maybe I'd slow down a little bit. Maybe I'd see if I can not take this personal. Maybe I can see if there's some way I can see the other person's perspective, even if I think on the surface it's asinine and there's no way that whatever they're thinking can make any sense. Having those two options to choose from is what the distinction concept is all about. And so that follows through with self-leader and prisoner. It just becomes something where as you're practicing it, you notice that you have access to these two different, quote, languages that you can respond with.
I love that, how you walk that through. That's so great. And I think that's really the constant journey we're on, right? Is like being able to choose which place we want to live in and what mindset we want to have. And I don't think there's anybody that wants to be a prisoner to their thoughts. So I know you share just one last question in regards to this whole talk is you talk about this consistency over intensity. And so when it comes to, as we were speaking about this continuous path of growth, some people get into, especially the goal getters, like they're on this path and they have a goal, they want to obtain it. And so they like put on their hustle shoes and they start like racing towards that goal. And then easily they'll burn out because that's not sustainable. So I know you talk about this consistency over intensity. And I think this goes and applies to, as we're talking about, always making a better choice to be in self-leadership. So what would you say in regards to that?
Yeah. Here's the thing. If we're talking about the context, let's say, of entrepreneurship or something, there's going to be periods of intensity, right? It's fine. That happens. And in fact, even in the science of flow, there is a period of intensity, but the flow cycle, there's kind of a 4-step flow cycle. The flow cycle has intensity as a part of it, but the level of intensity is matched by the end of the process, which is the same level of rest. Right. So if you're an Olympic athlete, you don't go perform at the Olympic Games and then go right into something else. The same level of intensity you just put into that match or whatever it was you were doing, you then have to rest at the same level. Right. That's the only way that you can continue being in that cycle. So the go-getter, the hustler, the goal-based person, the goal digger, if you will, if that works for you, right, then do it. This is not right or wrong, good or bad. If that works for you, fantastic. If it actually works for you, right? Yeah. So check in. If it works for you because you think that's what you're supposed to be doing because that's what everybody's told you, then it doesn't actually work for you. It works for them and you've taken it on as your own. But if it actually works for you, great. For most of us though, anybody can go really hard for a week, for a month, for a year, maybe even a few years, maybe even a decade. But like you said, it's going to catch up with you, right? So I have to ask myself, am I in this, whatever this is? Let's say for me, it's the personal growth world and trying to help people and serve people. If I'm in this for the next 2 years and then I'm retiring, screw it. I'll go hard for 2 years. I'll go super intense. I want to be in this for a lot longer than 2 more years. And so if that's the goal, if the goal is to be in this for the next 20, 30, 40 years, then I want to make sure that I'm creating a sustainable way to do that. And that goes with anything. So when you look at personal growth, the same thing happens here. And I've definitely been guilty of this as well. If just like immersion is great, but I really believe, and this is actually something one of my friends, Allie, who's a dear friend of mine who owns a functional mushroom company. And so she's not a personal growth person. And she said this thing, and it was so true. She said, too much introspection is just as dangerous as not enough introspection. Right. And it's, I really truly believe that. And Steve Chandler, who you know Steve Chandler, right?
I don't know.
Work at all, or okay. Well, Steve has been one of the biggest impacts in my life. Yeah, definitely check him out.
Good to know.
But he tells a story of, do you know Byron Katie?
Yes.
Are you familiar with Byron Katie?
Yes.
Okay. So Byron Katie has this thing called The Work. It's a series of 4 questions to shift your beliefs, really powerful stuff. It's all free. You can see it all on her website. And she has these forms, these worksheets you fill out to do the work, right? To answer these questions, to challenge your beliefs, to inquire, to do all these things. And so Steve tells this story about how he's talking to one of his clients, and his client was like, yeah, I've just been, just really dealing with it. I've done 5 Byron Katie worksheets today. And, I keep filling out worksheets all day because I'm so stressed out. And Steve says to him, you have a son, don't you? And he goes, yeah. He goes, how old's your son? He said, oh, he's almost 5 years old. And Steve said to him, cool. How many Byron Katie worksheets has he done today? And of course, the response is, well, none. He's just playing, living life, doing whatever he does. And Steve said, well, there may be something to learn from him, right? Yeah. Maybe there isn't always work to be done. Maybe sometimes a lot of times I feel like, and again, I've done this myself, I live in the realm of reading the menu instead of actually eating the food. And I'm hoping that if I read the menu long enough, my life will change. If I read the menu long enough, I'll get full, but I never do unless I actually go in the world and eat the food. So sometimes we have to get out from behind personal growth and actually just go live our lives. And I was on a podcast recently with this lovely woman who I love, and we were having a discussion about how you can bring more play and more joy into your life. And what I noticed as we were going through the interview was that at some point it almost started feeling really heavy that she was trying to extract the exact step by step that we need to be more joyful and play. What is the exact framework to make me more playful? And I started realizing the seriousness with which we were trying to figure out how to be more playful. And so we get to the end of the interview and she says, what's the last piece of wisdom? Like, am I dying or something? What's the last piece of wisdom you want to leave at the end of the podcast today? And just thinking back over the interview and how we had gotten pretty serious about play, I said, I think the thing I want to leave at the end of this interview is that none of it fucking matters. Like at the end of the day, it's essential that we do the personal growth work. And it's also irrelevant in the bigger scheme of things. So if you can hold the paradox, if all of us can hold the paradox of, yes, I'm doing the work, and no, the work doesn't have to be my life, then we experience life differently. And this is why, in my mind, Deadpool, the Marvel character, is the most spiritually evolved Marvel character that exists. And the reason I say that is because if you've watched the movie at all, he breaks the fourth wall. He talks to us, the audience at home, because he knows he's in an illusion. He knows he's in a comic book. He's the only one that knows that it's all bullshit. And he still shows up and performs at a level of excellence. He doesn't say, oh, it's all an illusion. I'm just going to go sit on my couch and wait to die. He goes, it's all an illusion. And since it's an illusion and has some really convincing mirages, I'm going to go out and play. I'm going to go engage with life. I'm going to show up fully for this thing called life.
Oh, I love that. That's so true. I think that's so great. And I think that's what, when it's all like, I think so many of us think about, oh, I need this thing to be perfect. So I got to do all these things. I got to read all these books, listen to all these podcasts. But then when we actually just step in this space and just do it, just see what naturally flows and just grow in that space, I think that's when life becomes really fun. And also you're challenging yourself, which is going to bring on more growth, opposed to just reading all the books. How do I become a perfect speaker? Just go out and speak. Just keep on speaking,
right.
That's the best way. At least I've definitely learned that, because I would be that type of person. Like, I got to learn all these things and I have to know all these things before I do it. And I realize, I'm just going to say yes and learn along the way. So
yeah, exactly. And that holds so many of us back from just starting things, right? Because there becomes so much significance, so much weight put on the thing that we say we want to do or learn, that it actually has the reverse effect. So we were talking about this before we started recording, that I just came back from Estonia, from MindValley University. And the talk that I gave there was literally called How to Lose the Weight, WAIT, right? So going from weight into creating. And I brought up the Nike slogan, the just do it, right? Everybody knows the Nike slogan. And I asked everybody in the audience, when you see this slogan, what word really catches your eye? Which is the one you focus on? And unanimously, it was do, right? Just do it. Like, get in there, do the thing. And what I offered to the audience was that when we are waiting to do things, it's not a strategic issue, it's a significance issue. It's that we've put too much significance on that thing. And so what I was inviting everybody in the audience to do was to shift their perspective to the word just like you just brush your teeth, or you just tell your partner you love them, or you just take out the trash. There's no significance. I don't need rosary beads or meditation or anything else to take out the trash. I just take out the trash. And so if we can take away some of the significance from this stuff and we just do the thing, not because it's going to make us finally, our family's finally going to see that we're a serious entrepreneur, or the world's finally going to accept me for whatever. What if I do it because it's Tuesday? And that's just what I do on Tuesday.
Love it. Oh, yes, absolutely. Oh, that's such a great way to end this episode. I love it. So I know I'm going to ask a question that might seem similar to what somebody else asked, but it's a very important question. And I ask all my guests to close off in, if you were to share a piece of wisdom, a life lesson that you've learned along your vast journey in life that you just feel everybody needs to hear right now, and you must share that message.
Yeah, so again, this talk that I was telling you about that I gave last night, somebody asked me, like, how do you help your clients? They have all these insights. How do you actually help them practice, in their life? How do they create a practice around that? And for me, my whole thing is I like to throw out 50 different versions of the exact same thing, which is really all I've done this entire interview is, I've given you all different kinds of ways to navigate to the exact same place. And my hope is that you don't take all 20 things that I shared and try to implement them, but that there's one of those 20 that you were like, there's something about those other 19, that one actually landed for me in some way. Go deep into that, immerse yourself in that one thing. And so the reason I say that is because even for me, with all the different things I teach, I will find one thing that resonates with me for the time. So like I have one right now, it could totally change a week from now. But right now I have one of my own teachings that resonates the most with me. So that's the one I'm keyed into for myself. And so that's the one that I want to share with all of you. So for me, what that looks like, this last piece of wisdom that I hope will be helpful for other people, is that I believe that anything we make the center of our universe, we will use all of our energy to protect it from failing or falling apart. So you make the business the center of your universe, you go to bed worrying about payroll, you wake up worrying about payroll. If you make your relationship the center of your universe, then everything, it's like, oh my God, what did he just, or did she just think that? Or what did she think about what I said there? And is she mad at me? Or where do I stand? Because it's the center of my universe, my health, my family, my friends, my kids. Like if you have kids, all of that, right? Anything you make the center of your universe, all of your energy is going to go into protecting it from failing or falling apart. And so what are you supposed to do with that? Well, I have decided that the only thing I want to make the center of my universe is my own experience of peace and ease. That's it. My own peace and ease is the only thing I want to make the center of my universe. And I brought this up. I was doing a talk for a group of 40 women leaders, really badass women leaders. And I shared this. And this one woman raised her hand with a question, and she goes, okay, cool. So I make my own peace and ease the center of my universe. My kids don't get fed. My employees don't get paid. My work doesn't get done. And I said, that's one possibility. I guess that could happen. But I know for me personally, if I had kids that needed to be fed, and I had employees that needed to be paid, and I had work that needed to be done, that would not contribute to my sense of peace and ease unless I did something about it. So when I start with my own peace and ease, and then I go operate in the world, I'm so much more effective, I'm so much more high performing, and I do it without all the stress and the seriousness and the struggle.
I love that. I love that. That's such a great way. It's almost leading your life intentionally, right? You're setting your intention. How do I want to operate? And so if you're wanting to lead with peace, love, and just a sense of freedom, if you want to say, if you remember that intention in everything you do, you will show up way differently. So that's so powerful. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Beautiful.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So
thank you.
Where can people best find you? Of course, please, everybody go get his best-selling book, Prison Break. It will be in the show notes. Yes, I read it and it's awesome. There's so much tactical steps to take from this book and really start to implement in your life. And like you said, you could just take out one thing and it could vastly change your life. So yes. So where can people best find you, Jason?
Yeah, I'm typically on the corner of Venice Boulevard and Lincoln, around the Venice. No, I'm kidding. No, don't seek me out there. Best place to find me online, Instagram. I am at the Jason Goldberg. Jason Goldberg was taken, so I got the most pretentious name I could possibly find, the Jason Goldberg. So I share all my content there. We can continue the conversation there. And there's a link in my bio there. You can actually get a free audio, digital, or paperback copy of the book. Paperback is if you're in the States, a few bucks shipping and handling, but you can get a free copy of my book and you can see all my stuff there.
Remarkable. Thank you so much, Jason. This has been such an honor and it's such a pleasure sharing the space with you and just hearing you speak about everything. And I love you're a phenomenal storyteller, which makes everything more enjoyable and fun. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Erica. Thanks for having me here. Thank you for the work you're doing, for the energy you bring to the work you're doing. And I'm excited to connect again in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.